Welcome to the Access to Innovators podcast, powered by the premier life skills university, High Point University.
Hi, and thank you for joining us. My name is Abby Van Metre. I graduated from High Point with a degree in political science in 2021, and I am currently part of the MACBL, or the Masters in Communication and Business Leadership, here at High Point University. Today I'm going one-on-one with 5 questions for Access to Innovators and High Point University's entrepreneur in residence, Marc Randolph. Marc, thanks for being with us today.
It is my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I've read about your love for chaos, and I think a lot of people struggle to identify what chaotic circumstances really are, but you seem to make it a condition that you prefer and seem to enjoy. Can you kind of walk me through how you handle chaos in your life?
Well, first of all, you're right. I think when things are stable, I find that a little disconcerting, boring, maybe. I wouldn't say that I like chaos. I like uncertainty, which is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know, you have to get an English major here to tell us, but chaos just feels like things are randomly flying around. And I probably don't like that any more than the next person does. But what I do enjoy is coming into circumstances where I don't know what the outcome is going to be, where I don't know what the right answer is, where really anything could happen. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm fortunate because that's what really entrepreneurship is all about. You're by definition trying to do something that hasn't been done before, which means you have to try things that you don't know if they're going to work. You have to do things where you don't know what the outcome is. And if you come to appreciate that, it's really, really fun. And that is, I guess, enjoying chaos. It's that excitement about, it's like going to a sporting event. Mm-hmm. The best sporting events are not the ones where you know that your team is going to win, you know they're going to win by 20 points, but where you have no idea what the outcome is going to be. You have no idea what crazy plays are going to redefine the game. And there's even an upset at the end. Well, I have kind of structured my whole life to be like that.
That's great. That's awesome. I think here at High Point, there's a reoccurring theme for a lot of us of transformation. From the time we get here to the time we leave, we are constantly encouraged to transform both personally and professionally. It's kind of our growth mindset situation. Can you walk me through how transformation in both your development of Netlix and your other entrepreneurial ventures has impacted your course of action or the things that you do?
Has impacted my what?
The things that you choose to do, how transformation has impacted you through Netflix or how you've transformed with Netflix or your other ventures as an entrepreneur.
Wow, I have no idea. I mean, it's one thing at going to getting an undergraduate education and you come in as this naive 18-year-old and you leave as this fairly polished 22-year-old. But my transformation has taken place, it's like geologic time, over 40 years or so. And so it's really hard to detect big seismic shifts in who I am.
That's totally fair.
I mean, certainly I've gone through this transformation of having to work for other people to being able to work for myself. Mm-hmm. This transformation of being able to do defined things to being able to pick what I choose to do and work on. Certainly the ability to get better and better at figuring out how to find balance in my life. But I fundamentally don't think I'm that different. Mm-hmm. I certainly feel like I'm still 18. I have no idea if I'm different. So I'm afraid it's not a great answer. I can't point to a single place where I go, oh my gosh, there's a big transformation in who I am.
That's totally fair.
Boring, but fair.
No, it's a good answer. Any answer is a good answer. On campus today, you're actually leading a life skills seminar on the power of an introduction. I think for soon-to-be college graduates like myself and young professionals in the workforce, we are constantly told to work on our introductions. And what piece of advice would you have to really make an introduction stick? Or for someone like me, how would you critique my introduction?
That's a really interesting thing. And had I known I was going to critique it, I would have been a little more attentive to it. But I'll just mention one thing, and I will critique you, so don't think you're getting away scot-free here. The realization that you have as an entrepreneur in fact, someone who wants to do anything, is you can almost never do it by yourselves. You always are needing to rely on other people. And whether that's forming a team of people to help you, whether it's getting an investor to invest in you, whether it's finding a customer to buy from you, whether it's getting your landlord to rent from you, everything we do requires that we gain the support of other people. And that is not automatic. And in fact, when it's purely transactional, when someone has to support you because it's the nature relationship, that's pretty unfulfilling and insignificant. So I've learned a long time ago how important it is to enlist people to help. And so much of that comes from asking and how you ask.
Okay.
And I've really spent a lot of time working on that. So the answer was, if there's a single piece of advice, is that it is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all situation. That you have to do your research. You have to understand what is in someone else's mind. You have to have empathy. You've got to know what problems they're trying to solve. What are they struggling with? What are their issues? Then you've got to really analyze, what do I bring to the table? What can I do to help support them? And then you have to make the connection about, why am I asking this now? And what you're really doing is an ask. An introduction in some ways is an ask to establish a connection. And thinking about that is the critical piece to it. And I've just done it so many hundreds, if not thousands of times. I love it. I obsess over, for example, emails. An email in some ways my favorite way of doing an introduction, either to myself or to somebody else, because I can stop and craft it. And I do. I spend ridiculous amounts of time when I'm doing a cold email to someone. And so that's biggest thing I do is you've got to think this through. You can't just use the standard thing. Everything has to be individualized. So in terms of your introduction to me, and I wish I had really thought about it, because I am just about to go teach a class on introduction, is that you really have to do a number of things. You have to say, why this person? Why Marc Randolph? Why this audience?
Okay.
And why now? And you didn't really present any of those things.
Okay.
I mean, you said who it is you're talking to and what the context was, but you didn't explain why my background or personality or experience gave me something that I had to say to your audience. You didn't actually tell the audience specifically why what I was going to be saying would be pertinent to them.
Okay.
And then why you were connecting us now. Because your job is twofold. You have to prepare the audience for me, but you've got to then make it comfortable for me to speak to them.
Right.
So listen, it's not easy. Making a good introduction is really, really hard. And having been introduced as a speaker lots and lots of times, I've seen good and bad. So I'd give you a B. You
know what? I will take the B. And I will work on my skills and get back to you, and hopefully I can get that A grade.
Well, in about half an hour, 40 minutes, you can come to the seminar, and you'll learn even the master class in how to introduce somebody.
Wonderful. I'll be there. Don't worry about it. So President Cubain talks a lot about unproductive success versus productive failures. And it's kind of this idea that even when you fail, you can learn a lot from it, and sometimes you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. I was hoping that you could kind of walk me through the way in which you handle a positive mindset when things don't always work out the way you think they're going to.
Well, things never work out the way you think they're going to. I mean, ever. And so part of being successful as an entrepreneur is training yourself in that the natural inclination for someone who's starting out is to not want to make a mistake. It's embarrassing to make a mistake. You feel like you're wasting resources. You feel like people are watching you, and if you make a mistake, they won't trust you again. There's a million reasons why we don't want to do something that we think may not work. But as with most things in your head, most of them aren't real, that you are not going to be tarred and feathered if something you suggest doesn't turn out to be right. And those are the things you should be practicing now. When you're still in school, when there really aren't that many consequences for making a mistake. Because what you're learning is not necessarily how to not make mistakes. What you're learning is that making mistakes don't matter. No one cares. And in fact, it's making mistakes, which is how you actually learn and progress. If you suggest something and it goes right, you've learned a very narrow set of things. And you're never really sure, did this go right because of what I said or in spite of what I said? So there's not a lot of learning that comes from getting it right the first time. Whereas when you try something that doesn't work, the learning is tremendous. And the more things you try, the more things that don't work, you begin to inform yourself about the problem, which fundamentally is the important thing here. So that's just a long way of saying the important skill here is to learn to be comfortable trying things that you don't know in advance are going to work. And that to me is what the growth mindset is. And it's gotten to the point now, and I've been doing this for so long, I don't even think twice about it. I'm more than happy to wade into something and see what happens. I mean, what I tell people all the time is you don't want to fall in love with your idea because your idea is going to break apart and it's a bad idea to begin with. So you don't want to fall in love with your idea. You want to fall in love with the problem. The problem's not going to go away. The problem you're going to learn more and more and more about, become richer and more nuanced. So don't worry. Try this idea. It doesn't work. Try another one. Try another one. Try another one. And once you realize that it's all good, that becomes easier and easier. And that, for me, is why the career that I have has been so unbelievably fun. It's like solving a puzzle every day.
That is so interesting. I love the way that you put that. Falling in love with the problem, not the idea. That is such a unique perspective to put on that. I really like that. We kind of talked about this earlier, but we'll touch on it now. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. It's not everyone's calling. But everyone can kind of learn from the entrepreneurial mindset or be a part of a team of entrepreneurs. So you talked about earlier that every good entrepreneur needs a team around them. But what kind of people make up a perfect team or a right hand to an entrepreneur?
So first of all, I'm going to challenge your assumption that not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. So I admit not everyone wants to make a living as an entrepreneur. Not everyone wants to start a business. In fact, relatively few people do. But everybody has some dream or another. Everybody has something that they want to accomplish or want to do that they're not sure they can make happen. I mean, as my buddy Nolan Bushnell says, anyone who's taken a shower has had an idea. And what I've kind of learned in 40 years of being an entrepreneur is that all of these same skills that I use to try and solve business problems are the exact same skills you would use to make anything happen that you want to make happen. You want to try and get a better job. You want to try and get a different apartment. You want to try and live in a different city. You want to start a club. All these things people want, it's the same process. You have to start. You have to break it down into small pieces. You have to be willing to have things not work. And learning those skills is so broadly applicable. I think everybody should learn how to adapt this entrepreneurial mindset, regardless of whether you want to be a veterinarian or whether you want to be an accountant or something you don't envision being entrepreneurial. But even in those kind of careers, yes, you're not going to experiment on healthcare, but you always will experiment with the way that you acquire customers or that you interact with your customers or your patients, or even experiment with things. There's got to be a better way for me to commute. And those approaches are exactly the same. So I think when I'm looking for people who have that, when I'm trying to instill that in people, it's entirely looking for people who are comfortable with ambiguity, who, if you're paralyzed by, I'm not going to take a step unless I can see the full path, you'll have a really, really hard time. And we all know people who are paralyzed by that.
Yeah.
And what you learn is that if you sit there at the beginning of the trail trying to study and look around the corner and see what's going to happen, and you wait and you do research and you launch drones and, okay, I finally figured out I know where the trail goes now, then you start on the trail and now there's 100 people ahead of you. But what you also learn is the best way to see what's around the corner is to take a few steps. You go, oh, I can see the next 100 yards, and you do that. Oh, I can see the next 100 yards. And that's what you're trying to instill in people, this realization you're not going to see the whole path. You just need to start.
That's great. I like the analogy of the path. I think that's a really well-spoken way to say that.
Oh, thank you.
I really do. At High Point, we talk a lot about values. And knowing a little bit about your background, I've been struck by the way you always seem to talk about your family. I think a lot of people perceive someone like the co-founder of Netflix to be on this like one-track mind of it's work first and everything else second. But you really have seemed to embody this really great balance of work and life and the value system that you have, in addition to like your quality of life with the work that you do. For someone like me who is starting out in the job world, who wants to find that balance, what are your key tips to finding that perfect slice of work and life?
So, well, the most important thing is this is not a one-size-fits-all thing. I mean, it's a very personal decision about how you want to structure your life. I do know people who work all the time, and they appear to be fulfilled at it. It was more I'm saying that I'm not that person. I realized, luckily, long ago, that I do want to have this relationship with my wife and this relationship with my children. I do want to have the time to get out and bike and ski and kayak and climb and the things that I know make me whole. And so I basically said it's important to me to structure my life that way. I'm going to make that, the priority is that, not the priority is work, and I build the rest of my life around it. And it's an easy thing to say. It's a very hard thing to do because there's always crises, there's problems, there's priorities, and that's part of life, is making these judgments of what's important. But one of the hardest things, notice Mark is going to get all philosophical on you here, is figuring out when it's appropriate to do various things. And we all can say how silly it is for the person who works and says, as soon as I retire, then I'm going to. And then, of course, by the time they retire at 70, they can't. They're too old. They can't travel, whatever the case is. All these passions they had, they can't do anymore. And we go, how tragic is that? And that classic, no one's on their deathbed says, I wish I'd worked more. Mm-hmm. But we also know you can go to the other extreme, whereas you go you're 15 and you go, what's the point of working? And we know those people are the ones who are day drinking behind the 7-Eleven at 11 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. And that's not a productive, valuable life either. And so it's always finding this balance between how do I find do the things I have to do and balance it with the things I want to do. So kind of the best analogy that has worked for me, again, this is for me, is I did, at 2 different points in my life, I got really deeply into triathlons. And I don't know whether you've ever run a triathlon
Absolutely
before.
Absolutely not. Nope. But I appreciate that you love them.
Well, you know that it's a swimming first, then it's biking, then it's running. And it's a mass start usually for the swimming. So you have this insane situation where you have 500 people on Speedos and goggles all lined up, and picture this, lined up on the edge of the lake, and they say, go, and everyone charges in, and it's a complete mess, and everyone's kicking, and your goggles are flying off, and you're on top of people, and there's flailing limbs. It is I imagine this is a values university, so I can't say what it really is.
It's chaos.
But what I've learned in those things is that what you have to do is you've got to sprint. You get in the water and you've got to go really hard, harder than you could possibly sustain for the several hours you're going to be in this entire race. But you've got to get ahead of all the flailing limbs. You've got to find open water. You've got to get to a place. And then all of a sudden you realize I have space around me, and then you can settle into your regular pace. And life is kind of like that.
Okay.
And so are startups. And you can be writ large and it can be writ small, but there's this period where you have to go hard. And for me, that was my 20s. I mean, I worked like a madman in my 20s, and not because I was pushed to. I loved what I was doing. I couldn't wait to get to work, and I'd stay up really late. I'd go in on the weekends, and I did that into my late 20s. And I didn't stop doing that because I was tired of working that hard. I've always loved what I'd done. I've always wanted to spend more hours on it. I changed because I recognized that my girlfriend, my now wife, was getting the short end of the stick here. And I said, if I really want this sustainable relationship, if I don't want to be the entrepreneur in his 6th company and his 6th wife, I'm going to have to do something about this. And had this kind of revelation, and I realized that was the point where I said, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to work smarter. I'm going to figure out how can I be a successful entrepreneur, but also be a successful husband. And during my late 20s, I had to cancel my subscription to Outside Magazine because it was too painful to see pictures of people doing all these things I didn't have time for. And I had the same realization, which is, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? This is not life. I'm going to figure. I'm a smart guy. Mm-hmm. I'm going to figure out how can I have all three of these things. And I made that a life passion to figure it out. And as I mentioned, last night in my chat with Dr. Cubain, I go, when I look back on what I'm proudest of, it's that. It's not the 6 companies. It's the fact that I could do the 6 companies and stay married and have my kids know me, et cetera, and still be able to get out and surf and climb and run. And that's the success part.
Yeah, that is so inspiring. So do you think there's a difference between loving what you're working on and loving to work? And do you think that difference or that distinction is important?
Well, for me, it certainly is. I don't love... Does anyone love to work?
I think somebody's got to, right? Someone has to.
I don't know. I don't think anyone... I think, God, it's alien concept to me. Mm-hmm. There's a... I know a lot of college students have ADHD. Mm-hmm. And ADHD is not the inability to pay attention. It's an inability to pay attention to things you're not interested in. And I guess by that definition, I'm ADHD.
Yeah.
I mean, not literally, but I mean, I work really hard not because I like working hard. I'm as much of a slog as the next guy. I just get so passionate about certain things. They're so interesting, so compelling, that I want to discover. I want to try. I can't wait to try the next experiment. I can't wait to see the results of my past experiment. That's not work, though. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is work. It's work by the definition of I'm not sitting on the sitting on the couch and I'm not playing golf, but that's fun.
That's awesome.
But listen, don't get me wrong. All these things I've kind of realized there's a balance between what you need to do and what you want to do, and there's nothing that doesn't contain ingredients of things I don't want to do that I have to do. Mm-hmm. And the skill is, how do you put yourself in a position where it's more what I want to do and less what I have to do? And unfortunately, that takes a while. I mean, when you're in your 20s, you're going to have to work for the man, as the expression goes.
So they tell me.
A little gender dated here, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
And it's going to take a while for you to demonstrate that you have the talent and the skills and the experience to be given more and more responsibilities so that you have the ability to do the things you enjoy doing rather than the things that someone's telling you to do. Mm-hmm. But you get past that.
It's all part of that big triathlon, right? The different phases.
Exactly right.
I guess my question would be, for me as a graduate student who is entering into the workforce, what is the best way for me to establish, like you talked about, establishing that you have the mindset and the credentials and the skills to be successful in the workplace? What is the best way in my first couple of years or months in a new work environment to kind of set myself apart in that way?
Your biggest decision is going to be where you go.
Okay.
Which job you take, what you do. And if that is your goal, pick the job which is going to give you the best opportunity to do that. Okay. As opposed to getting obsessed with what title it is, getting obsessed with what it pays, getting obsessed with any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. At this point in your career, you're trying to learn and demonstrate, and there's absolutely certain roles that are going to do that better than others. Even to the fact, if you can afford it, do it for free. Do an internship. Do something which puts you in close relationship with someone who will appreciate you, who respects you, and who will teach you, and then do whatever they want. And that's a way more powerful thing. So many people get, this is so exciting, I'm going to work for BlackRock, or I'm going to work for Microsoft. And they end up being one of 700
Yeah.
Death.
It's just a job.
Just a job. Well, it's a really well-paying job, but they're really well-paying jobs because they can't get people to take them because they're so mind-numbing. And especially at the beginning. I mean, I assume you don't have house payments yet?
No, not yet.
I assume you don't have a bunch of kids in private school and car payments. And, it gets a lot harder when you get to a certain point in your life. Right now, you can afford to live 4 to an apartment and eat ramen.
Yeah.
and take advantage of that, to take these risks. The simplest advice I give people is, find the smartest person you know who will take you seriously and then do whatever they want.
That's good advice.
And then you go back to my how to make an introduction or how to introduce yourself, and you pick those people. And you begin saying, let's find out how good I am. Let me see if I can get myself in front of this person. Let me see if I can convince this person that they should let me work for them. And then figure out what can I give them and what do they want from me in return. Again, and it's an individual problem. You don't send out a blanket email or phone call to 100 people. I have no idea what your background is, but let's say you were doing sports management. So you go, I think I can get to Cynthia Marshall, whatever her name is. Then you think for a long time, what do I have to offer her? You really research it. You go, what are my skills? How do I make the connection? And you go full bore on that one thing, and you go, I don't care what you pay me. I don't care what role you put me in. I want to work from you. I want to learn from you. That's what I would do if I was in your position.
That's great advice. That's really good advice. So I should just start sending out researched emails to people?
First, you want to figure out exactly what it is you think you want to learn and where it can be that you start off by saying, where I can demonstrate that I'm capable of given more responsibility. I want you to really think about what is the scenario where that's possible. And that is what you want to try and find in these first few jobs. When you're looking at who is my boss, what responsibilities might I be given, what opportunities, all the stuff you're asking me, you got to figure that out and then pick. It's not like I'm going to land in this job because the recruiter came to High Point and I got hired into the Kellogg's management.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But if you end up there and you go, this is nothing, that's your fault.
Okay.
I
respect that 100%.
And nothing against Kellogg's or their management program. I just picked a random, just in case they're big High Point sponsors.
That's so funny. I guess another question I'd have, as we've been sitting here, you're such a good mentor. You have so much advice that you're willing to give young people like me that are starting out and anyone who's listening to this podcast. Like, what makes you enjoy being a mentor or working with college kids? Because we can be a lot. So I appreciate your time.
You can be a handful, that's for sure. But I have 3 of them of my own, so I'm familiar with the genre. It's funny because it's not entirely altruistic. It's a way for me to get a fix too. I love solving problems, and helping people is in some way a problem. Because when you asked me just a few moments ago, how do I do this? It wasn't like, oh, this is advice. This was like, oh, that's an interesting problem. How would I solve that problem? And now I want to try and coach someone to actually be successful and see if they can actually do that. So all the mentorship that I do comes from that place. It also comes from that place that I mentioned before, realizing that all the stuff that I've learned is so broadly applicable. It's not for someone, Mark, how do I start a company? It's, how do I find this job? It's, Mark, how do I do this? And I go, I have all these things I've learned. Okay, how can I help someone apply some of those skills to solve the thing that they're trying to solve? It's, I don't know, it's just really, really awesome. It's become probably the most important thing that I do now. It's why I do my own podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't interview celebrity entrepreneurs. I actually coach startup people because I'm trying to help them. That's why I wrote the book, because I'm trying to help these people. It's why I write the blog. It's why I do the social. It's all those things, the same versions of, gosh, I have this stuff that can help people. How do I do it?
That's so great. That is so great. I have really enjoyed speaking with you today. This has been such a great conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Oh, I did. This was a thrill a minute. No, it's great. This is fun.
Wonderful.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Maybe a B on the intro, but I'll give you an AA minus on the interview.
I'll work on it.